Asato ma sadagamaya tamaso ma jyoti gamaya mrityormam amritam gamaya avir maedhi Rudra yate dakshinam mukham tenamaham pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. And reach us through and through ourselves. And evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. I don't know if this microphone is too hypersensitive. My subject this morning is the mountain path. And we're going to be talking about knowledge, about self-knowledge, and about self-realization, and about the path to enlightenment, which is called Jnana Yoga. The outstanding teaching of this Vedanta philosophy is that you are the self, your true self, that is self with a capital S. In Sanskrit, it's called the Atman. In your true nature, you are the self. You are the Atman. You are not the body, the flesh and blood body that is born, grows old, and dies. You are not your feelings, which rise and fall in the lake of the mind, or your thoughts, which rise in that lake blown by the wind of desire. You are not the role that you play in the melodrama of life. You are not the person that you think yourself to be. Your personality is like a persona, a Greek mask. They call that the persona through which you relate to the outside world. In your true nature, you are the spirit. The spirit is by definition metaphysical, transpersonal, super conscious, super sensuous. The spirit is by definition unlimited, immortal, eternal, and absolute. The spirit is not something that you have to become. Spiritual life is not about becoming, it's about being. You are already the spirit. You're already infinite. You're already blissful. You're already perfect. The problem is that we don't feel that way. And we don't experience that in our mind and in our heart. This is due, saints and sages tell us that this is due to a sort of a metaphysical amnesia. We've forgotten our true nature. We've forgotten ourselves. We're distanced from ourselves. And for that reason, we are caught in the wheel of birth and death and suffer in life after life. The goal of spiritual life, the goal of religion, is to regain our lost memory, to recall and to remember and to know that we are the Atman, our true self. The simplest, the most direct way to do this, to realize your true self, is called Jnana Yoga. Jnana means spiritual self-knowledge. Yoga means the way to realize that knowledge. So Jnana Yoga is the way to realize your true self. Let's look first at some prerequisites before you are, in ancient times, they had a doctrine was in place. That doctrine was called Adhikaravada. That means it was assumed there were many requirements that you had to fulfill in order to be considered a fit disciple to hear this teaching of the Vedanta philosophy, and in particular this teaching of the Advaita Vedanta. Those are called, in Sanskrit, the sadhana chatushtaya. That means the 4 qualifications. Nitya nitya, vastu viveka, ihamutra palabhoga viraga, shamadhi shatka sampatir, mumukshu tvam iti sputam. Those are the four prerequisites that we need to fulfill in order to begin to study this philosophy. On another occasion, I have discussed these 4 qualifications of a fit disciple in great detail. So we're not going to go over them this morning. Suffice it to say that it is assumed before you begin this practice that you are established in moral and ethical living, and that the ground is fertile and fit for sowing seeds. Today, this prerequisite is largely ignored. Today, the Advaita Vedanta teaching, that is, these teachings of Vedanta, are widely available everywhere. You don't have to journey up over hill and day up into the mountains and find a saint or a sage living in a cave in the Himalayas. Everywhere you go, you can find this teaching of the Advaita Vedanta. But the fact is that the Adhikaravada doctrine is still in full sway. And that is, you cannot fully benefit from this teaching of Jnana Yoga until you are established in the 4 sadhanas. So our question this morning is how to attain self-knowledge. It was a question that was asked by the wife of a great sage in ancient times. Her name was Maitreyi. And Maitreyi, she approached her husband Yajnavalkya, who was a man of self-knowledge, was an enlightened sage. And she asked him, what is the way to realize the self? How can I realize the ultimate truth about myself? And Yajnavalkya replied, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasitavyo Maitreyi. There he gives us 3 steps, 3 stages in this practice. The first stage is a stage of learning and scriptural study. The second stage is all about contemplation and self-reflection. The third is about self-affirmation. We could say it's all about eating, digesting, and assimilating the spiritual food. So let's look here at these stages. First stage, Shravana. Shravana literally means hearing. That means you have to hear about this teaching. At this stage, it's all about adopting a new world view. You have to accept the Advaita Vedanta as your personal philosophy, your personal philosophy of life, and make a serious commitment to the study and mastery of the principles of this philosophy. The project at this stage is to define your belief system in accord with that of the Advaita Vedanta. You have to, in pursuit of this, you have to seek out a Shrotriya. That means someone who is an authority on this teaching. That is a mentor, a teacher of the Advaita Vedanta. And sitting at the knee of listening, you have to hear the teaching from your mentor. Having heard that teaching, you need to engage in active scriptural studies. This requirement is much more than just devotional scriptural reading. That is, Vedanta, this Advaita Vedanta is a philosophy. That means it has an ontology, it has an epistemology, it has a whole system of ethics and logic and aesthetics. The first stage of Jnana Yoga is about learning this philosophy, this system of justified true beliefs, and making them your own. Don't think of this stage as merely intellectual. This first stage of Jnana, in this first stage of Jnana Yoga, you are not like a philosophy student trying to master a quantity of book knowledge. This is not an academic exercise. The project in this first stage of Jnana Yoga is rather to formulate and to define your own worldview in light of the Advaita Vedanta philosophy. You are framing your personal worldview. You're redefining your personal value system. You are necessarily reconceptualizing your self, redefining who you really are. In fact, you are engaged in a total reconstruction project, the reconstruction of the belief system that lies at the foundation of your psyche. Now, many of you today are well on your way through this first stage of Jnana Yoga. Many of you have had a spiritual awakening. You're established in moral and ethical living. You've studied the Vedanta philosophy. You've studied the Advaita Vedanta philosophy. As a result of which, you have a new perspective on life. You have a new way of looking at life. You have a whole new picture of yourself and a new conception of yourself. You have heard and read a lot of philosophy. In fact, your whole bookshelf may be filled with books on the I hope, on the Advaita Vedanta philosophy. Therefore, it is at this stage that we're ready to move forward into the second stage of Jnana Yoga, a stage which is all about analytical reflection and contemplation. In Sanskrit, it's called manana. Manana is literally translated as thinking. This Jnana Yoga emphasizes thinking as the way out of bondage. There are other ways to free yourself from bondage. That is, you could feel your way out. You could mantra your way out. You could visualize your way out. You could act your way out. But Jnana Yoga is a teaching which is all about using your rational power, your power of rational thought. It addresses us as reasonable agents and teaches us that the way out by following this path. You know, as you're all acquainted with the teachings of Vedanta philosophy, there are four different paths. This morning we're talking here about a particular path. And in this particular path, the Jnanis emphasize the use of reason. In order to correct our thoughts, Jnana Yoga employs the faculty of reason. Other forms of yoga use other means, other tools to achieve their ends. Bhakti Yoga, for example, uses the tool or the means of employing our natural feelings and emotions. Raja Yoga employs the tool of our powers of intuition. Karma Yoga uses the tool of will and of intentional action. But Jnana Yoga, different from these paths, uses the tool and the power of reason. This is why we could call this path the path of pure reason. And you may say, well, reasoning is not spiritual. Thinking is not spiritual. Well, it's true that it's true that the buddhi is not the Atman. But the fact is that the buddhi, the intellect, the reasoning power, that which makes us human, is the closest thing to the Atman. That's the greatest power that we have. The purpose of manana, we're talking about the second stage here. The second stage now of Jnana Yoga, the purpose of this stage is to achieve a settled conviction of the truths. This is a time of contemplation and of self-reflection. We finished the first stage. You already know what the truth is. Now the project is to achieve a settled conviction of that truth. And an understanding of that truth. You've heard that maybe you've gone to a physics class and you've heard that E equals mc squared. Now you know E equals nc squared. But you still have more work to do to figure out what that means. That's our project, manana, thinking about what it means. That's how information becomes knowledge. Knowledge is it means you have to know what the information means, what the facts mean. If I tell you, for most things that's easy. If I say the word mango, immediately in your mind you picture a mango. No problem, you've seen a mango before. But if I use the word eternal, you just come up with a blank. It doesn't make sense. The word eternal doesn't make sense to us. That is, it's not a sense object. Therefore, we need understanding. We need contemplation. We need reflection. The essential teachings of the Vedanta philosophy, which you have mastered in the first portion of this practice. You've mastered those teachings. You know that Brahman alone is real, the world is unreal, and that you are Brahman, that you are a divine immortal soul. You know those things. But now you need to take some time for reflection, some time for analysis, so that we can understand what it means to say that I am an eternal, a divine, immortal soul. And even after that understanding of those teachings, you will find that you don't understand it. And there's still more work to be done. There's still more progress to be made. You will come to the point where you clearly know what is the truth, but you don't have a settled conviction about that truth. You know it's true, and you believe it's true, and you're convinced that it's true, but you don't feel that it's true. That's the second stage. We're lacking in integration. We're lacking in commitment. And the problem at this stage is that we have subliminal doubts. That is to say, we lack an emotional conviction about the truth. And you've studied the teaching. You know what the teaching is. You know and are convinced that the teaching is true, but you don't feel that it's true. That is, there are feelings of subliminal doubt that these doubts are due to hidden conflicts in our unconscious. These feelings of doubt are emotional responses to beliefs which are still part of the foundation of our psyche and are in our unconscious. The reason for our doubt is that we have there are conflicting thoughts in the unconscious. And our problem at this stage is one which in Jnana Yoga is called avidya, anti-knowledge. That means there are false beliefs which we still hold in our own mind and heart. The fact is that if you want to pass a law in the United States, that first you have to get the approval of the president. But even if the president approves, that's not enough. You still have to get the support of all the remaining members of Congress. And The fact is that you need to go and confront each member of Congress, engage them in dialogue, and get their agreement to further your project. The same is true in this practice of jnana yoga. These beliefs, we need to do a lot of work. We need to do more work to convince ourselves of the truths of Vedanta. And this means a lot of inner work. This means self-analysis. This means introspection. This means reflection, contemplation. We have to take these ideas, which in our conscious mind we're clear about. We finished stage one. We need to take those ideas and bring them down into our unconscious mind. That's what contemplation means. We have to think about the implications of those ideas. We have to digest the food. And it's at this stage that we are struggling them to overcome avidya, which we can translate here in this context as anti-knowledge. To remove those subliminal false beliefs which are clouding our understanding so that we cannot fully commit to this teaching. That's commitment. Happens all the time. A man meets the perfect woman. She would be my ideal of the perfect wife. But he doesn't want to make a commitment. Why? That's because of anti-knowledge. That is, may not even be conscious. Somewhere in the unconscious, there's obstacles. There's other contrary thoughts. There's contrary feelings which are working against yourself. You're divided against yourself. Similarly, it is here in this jnana yoga practice. You can't be divided against yourself. You have to be ready to make a full commitment. You have to be ready to live with faith. You remember, by the way, faith, that is, in Sanskrit it's called shraddha. That was one of the requirements before we even began. That's one of the 4 sadhanas that you were supposed to have before you even began this practice. So a lot of the confusion about this practice, you can think about, go back to the 4 sadhanas, which are the prerequisites, and a lot will become clear, because they're assuming that you've made a lot of progress before you even begin this. So, Shravana, we have 3 stages then. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Shravana just means is that we become clear. We begin to have that whole set of justified true beliefs, which is the Advaita Vedanta philosophy. We become clear about that, what it is, and we understand what those things mean, what that means. Second stage, Manana, we finished. We achieve with contemplation, meditation, self-analysis, digesting those thoughts, integrating those thoughts. At that time, we can move to the 3rd stage of jnana yoga, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Nididhyasana, well, that's a big word. Don't be afraid of Sanskrit words. Sanskrit is the language of philosophy. So we have to incorporate some of these words into our vocabulary. This is kind of a technical term. You're not going to find this in any Webster's desktop collegiate dictionary. Nididhyasana. Nididhyasana, it's often translated as meditation. But the meditation of jnana yoga is different from that of Raja Yoga. Remember, we've got 4, the teaching that you all know this. The Vedanta teaching, the Vedanta philosophy is is that there are as many paths as there are people. Everyone has their own path to realize the truth. But the fact is that we can sort all those paths into 4 major categories which align with the Jungian character types. We call them the yogas. And so there are Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga. This morning we're talking about a particular path. We're talking about Jnana Yoga. The ideal of Vedanta is to practice all 4 of the yogas, to harmonize that practice in our life. And so although this morning we're focusing on one path, we know that our ideal, that this is part of our practice. This is one component of our ideal practice, which includes all of the yogas. Okay, nididhyasana, often translated as meditation. It's not like the meditation of Raja Yoga. In this, how is it different? Well, this is about knowledge. Raja Yoga is all about concentration of mind. This practice is a first-person practice. It's not a practice of meditating on a third person or on an object. This practice of self-knowledge is perhaps best translated as self-affirmation. An affirmation is a simple truth statement. And the idea is that you have to, at this stage, the project now, the practice now, is to affirm the truth about yourself. About yourself, about your mind, about your heart, about your true nature, about the world, about other people, the truths which you have learned in the Advaita Vedanta philosophy. Remember, what's the difference between Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy? Very simple. This philosophy is a philosophy of life. This is not an academic philosophy which you study as a course in a university. This is a philosophy of life. This is my philosophy. You have to identify with these ideas. So the point is that at this stage you have to affirm the truth about yourself, and the practice is you negate the faults. You assert what is the truth about yourself. This practice of self-affirmation is the tool that we use in Jnana Yoga. Other yogas use different tools. Bhakti Yoga uses the tool of prayer. Karma Yoga uses the tool of will. Raja Yoga uses the mantra and the yantra. In Jnana Yoga, the tool that you're going to be using is the self-affirmation. The self-affirmation is a simple, clear statement of the basic, fundamental truths of your philosophy of life. The essential teaching there, the essential teaching, which I quoted to you before, Brahman alone is real, the world is unreal, and thou art that. The essential teaching, that is the conclusion of the syllogism, is, I am a divine immortal soul. The conclusion of the syllogism is, I am Brahman. That is the affirmation. That is the fundamental statement of truth that we've derived. That's kind of the bottom line that's been derived from the whole study of the philosophy. The whole study of the philosophy, the purpose of that was to arrive at this conclusion. I am a divine immortal soul. That was the whole purpose. To convince yourself that that was the truth. Now the practice is to affirm that truth. And this practice of self-affirmation is based on the principle that as you think, so do you become. In ancient times, Janaka, the king, Janaka, he approached the sage Ashtavakra and asked him the question this morning. Asked him, how can I realize the self? How can I attain to self-knowledge? And Ashtavakra replied, Muktabhimani mukto hi baddho baddhabhimanyapi kim vadantiha satyeyam ya matir sa gatir bhavet. That's what it says. He says there, see what we're discussing this morning, it was discussed 1,000 years ago. Same problem. Ashtavakra replied, he said, if you think that you're free, then free you will become. If you think that you're bound, bound you will remain. This famous saying is true. As a man thinks, so does he become. That's the Vedanta teaching. Self-affirmation. You can find affirmations of truth, of the truth of the Vedanta philosophy. Where will you find them? You'll find them all through the scriptures of the Vedanta. You will find them in the Upanishads, very clearly stated. For example, the 4 Mahavakyas, that is 4 aphorisms, 4 affirmations of this truth. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Atma Brahma, Tattvamasi. These are all clear, simple, aphoristic statements, the conclusions of the truth. Remember now, in this stage, this is the 3rd stage. You've gone through a lot of a process of thinking, understanding, assimilating, self-reflection. Now you're ready to forget all that. You've boiled it down to a few easy remembered words. The whole of the process has been boiled down into 1 or 2 little sentences. You don't have to remember, you don't have to forget all your books. You put your books aside after the Shravana. Stage number 1, you put your books away. Stage number 2, you were supposed to be thinking. No books, no book knowledge, only contemplation. Now stage number 3, you don't have to be even racking your brains anymore. All you have to do is remember these simple affirmations of truth. Where do you get those affirmations? Well, I give you the 4 Mahavakyas. For example, you can read Shankaracharya. Remember the Nirvana Shatakam, the refrain of the Nirvana Shatakam. Satchidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. These are affirmations of truth. These affirmations, you don't have to know Sanskrit. These affirmations are not tantric mantras. You don't have to repeat this. It's not like a mantra. Your guru gives you a mantra in Raja Yoga. You have to remember the Sanskrit. If you make a mistake in the Sanskrit, it doesn't work. Here it's totally different. Here you don't have to know the Sanskrit. It'd be nice if you did. But essentially, you don't have to know the Sanskrit. Good old American Anglo-Saxon English is what you want to use. You're speaking to yourself. You're speaking to your own heart. You're speaking to yourself in your own mother language. I am. The first statement, the first part of the affirmation is I am. What is the affirmation? It's not I am Mr. So-and-so. I am this, I'm this. No, it has to be an affirmation of truth. An affirmation of the principles of the Vedanta philosophy. And so that is the practice. This knowledge is transformative. It will have a transformative effect on our lives. Knowledge is light. Knowledge removes ignorance. Don't think that thoughts, that is the thoughts that we're holding, the justified, true beliefs that we're holding about this Vedanta philosophy are not mere words. That is, a thought is a vritti. A vritti is an excitation in consciousness. It's a movement, it's a mental mode. It's a mental state. And it's not like mere words written in a book. Those words have derived intentionality. Your thought has intrinsic intentionality. It's a living thing. That's why it can have a transformative effect. Thoughts are the foundation of our psyche. When you hold a thought, any thought, around that thought there develops an aura of feeling. That's where feelings come from. Feelings and emotions are derived from thoughts, from beliefs that we have. And they are the result of decisions that we've made about what are the true beliefs. Because we have a lot of different options. We decide one belief is true, and now that belief is true, that becomes one of the building blocks of the foundation of our psyche, and our feelings begin to cycle around that. As a result of which, you're thinking, feeling. What is a natural stage is to begin to speak. Of course, speaking means thinking low, that means thinking, and then speaking, thinking aloud. And then your behavior, your thoughts, your feelings, your speech, your action. They're all four different descriptions of basically the same thing. They're different levels of description of the same thing. So you can see that's why this has a transformative effect, because if you change your thoughts, you're going to begin to change your feelings, and you're going to begin to by a natural concatenation here, you're going to begin to change your speech and your actions. This is the teaching this is yoga psychology. This was the kind of teaching, this is the same idea, was taught by the Greek philosopher Plato. Plato maintained, one of Plato's main teachings is, knowledge is virtue. That is, if you know something, if you believe something, that automatically you will begin to feel and think and act in accord with what you believe. If you find that you don't feel it, you're not acting in accord with your beliefs, that means you're not clear about your beliefs. Or you have contrary anti-knowledge, which is conflicting for your attention, and thus you're not integrated. But if you are integrated, this practice has a transformative effect. You remember there was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. His name was Swami Vedarupananda. One of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, he at one time was doing this practice we were talking about this morning. He was sitting by the banks of the Ganges, and he would be sitting there quietly repeating his affirmations. It's called vichara. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I am a divine immortal soul. Like this, he was doing vichara, negating the false beliefs, affirming the true beliefs. Then it was time for his morning ablutions in the river Ganges. So he goes down, he wades into the river Ganges, swims out a little there in the water. And as he's deeply immersed there in the water, he looks across the surface of the water, and there he sees two eyes, or crocodiles. So in the Ganges, in some places in the backwaters of the eddies, there are crocodiles. He saw that crocodile coming towards him. His first immediate reaction, get out of the water. He started to scramble to get out of the water. But then his second thought, he thought, wait a minute, what am I doing? I was just sitting there on the banks of the river saying, I'm a divine immortal soul. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. Immediately his body relaxed. He stopped. That is, see how the behavior, the thought, feeling, his feelings shifted, his behavior shifted, and then he relaxed. Watch the crocodile. Well, so happened the crocodile maybe was not hungry, just swam right by him. Don't try this in the Ganges, but let's look here at this, couple of the benefits of this practice. Shravana. Shravana manana nididhasana. Shravana will give you right knowledge and understanding about yourself and about your philosophy of life. You will become clear, you will get clear answers to the fundamental questions of life that everyone is struggling with. You see, everyone in the world is a natural born philosopher. Consciously or unconsciously, we struggle with the basic fundamental questions of philosophy. Consciously or unconsciously, everyone has answered those questions. But in this thing, first thing, we become clear about, we acquire right knowledge about ourselves, about the nature of the world, about who we are, who other people are. Second stage led us to practice contemplation and reflection on the truth. That is, the second stage gave us a deep, settled conviction about the truth. First stage gave us the truth. Second stage gave us a deep, settled conviction about the truth. And the third stage, self-affirmation, enabled us to steady the conclusion of this philosophy, to steady the conclusion of right knowledge in the mind. When this right knowledge, it's called the Brahmakara Vritti, when this right knowledge is settled in the mind, when it becomes steady in the mind, then that vritti, that is that thought, will consume itself like a lump of camphor. That means, the analogy given by Sri Ramakrishna at that time, the salt doll will wade into the ocean, or the waters of the ocean, and the salt doll will dissolve into the ocean. That means holding that Brahmakara Vritti in the mind, that what happens is, when the vritti dissolves, these are just technicalities, when the vritti dissolves, then the self, the Atman, remains as the self-luminous Atma. The Atman becomes Brahman. The knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. This is what is called enlightenment. If the jnani, that is, if the enlightened jnani, returns to consciousness of the external world, then he will remain as the witness of the three states of consciousness. He will remain and live in the world as a man of steady wisdom. This is what's called being enlightened. In Vedanta, we don't use the word enlightenment. We use the word moksha. Moksha. Moksha means liberation. Finally, let us visualize the Brahma Jnani. The ideal of Jnana Yoga is to become a knower of the self. The ideal is to become a sage, to become a muni, to become a a man of steady wisdom. Remember, all the different yogas have different ideals. In this yoga, your ideal is to become, as it's described there in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, a man of steady wisdom. You want to read about this ideal, what it looks like, the guy who's realized this? Read chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. Give you a good description of what this Brahmagyani is like. This Brahmagyani, that is the sage, is a true philosopher in the Platonic sense. In Plato's philosophy, you remember that Plato's philosopher is the one who found his way out of the cave, that all of humanity is bound in a cave, watching the shadows as they flicker across the wall of the cave. One great sage, he finds his way out of the cave. He's a true philosopher. He wends his way up into the light of the real world, and there he sees the real objects. He looks up into the sky, and there he sees the sun, the good, the God that illumines it all and makes it all true. That is, he's living in a world of truth. Jnana Yoga shows us the way out of the cave into a higher world of light and truth. Om Dyo Shanti Antariksha Shanti Prithvi Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the skies and the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.